Well, at the end of, this is part 8, by the way, of the Ford F-150, 1951 Ford F-150 rebuild series. At the end of part 7, I indicated that the next thing we were going to do was to pull this frame out, flip it around, and get ready to install the motor. And we are getting ready to install the motor, but we need to deal with this first. This cross member that you see here is the old transmission cross member. Tiny little transmission, 3-speed that was in this thing. Nothing like this transmission that we're going to be using, a Tremec T56 6-speed manual. Anyway, so we've got to deal with this cross member. Easy enough to take it out, grind out a bunch of rivets, and drop it out of there. But this is also where the foot pedal system for this truck mounted originally. Here you can see is the brake pedal, and then the clutch pedals kind of laid over right there. But so you had these two pedals, clutch and brake, and we're going in with power brakes, and we're also going with a hydraulic assisted clutch. And so when looking for the right components to do that with, and I was totally unable to find a power brake system that also had a clutch with it. Here is the power brake booster and pedal and master cylinder, but it does not involve the clutch. It only involves the brake. So there's no clutch pedal option for this thing. You can probably see right in there where the clutch pedal should be, and it's not. So we got to figure out what we're going to do. For sure, I don't want to. One option was, hack the cross member, take 2/3 of the cross member out, and just leave that little tab section over there. But it's not going to be very strong. It's not reinforced on both ends, so that's out. The other option now is just to, well, let me show you the new mount system for this master cylinder is this plate, and this plate bolts. Get it here. Bolts onto the frame, something like that, or I'll actually flip it around, I think. And then the master cylinder, the pedal assembly master cylinder bolt on here. So that gets us away from needing the cross member. So a couple things have to happen. First, I need to dimensionalize where these center point is on these pedals, so that whenever I do mount this component onto the frame, I mount in the right place, and the pedals come to the floor the same place, and it's similar. Then I need to figure out how to modify to include a clutch pedal. And I mean, I could take this clutch pedal off of here and modify the pivot point on this thing, say right in here, so the clutch pedal could be involved. Or I could simply reuse this part, and attach it to this one. So that's what we got to figure out. Which way are we going to go? First thing I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to dimensionalize the pedal system, so at least, good or bad, right or wrong, I can get in the correct location. So we'll start there, and I'll get back to you. After dwelling on this for a while, I think the correct approach, well, the approach I'm going to take, it's not a correct one, I guess, is to take this assembly, and you see where there's 4 bolt holes. You see 2 of them there, there's 2 on the bottom, and basically bolt it onto here. Take these 4 nuts loose, pull this back, and then bolt this one onto there. I will have to make an adapter plate because the bolt patterns are not the same. So what I'm thinking is make a plate, stand it off just a touch from the vacuum booster. Maybe put a nut behind it, and then put a nut on the other side just to stand it off a little bit. And then drill through the plate to align with these holes and weld some bolts in the back of the plate. and that little spacer will give us room for those bolts. And then once this pedal assembly, which needs to be dismantled and cleaned up, obviously, once this pedal assembly is mounted on there, then we'll need to sort out how to deal with the mounting brace system over there. So that's a reasonable amount of fab up. What I may consider is just leaving this brace on there that's already on there. That might be the way to go. And just cut off the pedal portion, and that way the mounting brace, which is on the back side over there, will still be intact. And yeah, that might be a good approach. Either way, something's got to give, because this thing just doesn't have enough room for a clutch pedal unless we modify it. So anyway, let's move on, see if we can do, hopefully we won't do anything wrong later. Alright, well, we were able to build us an adapter plate that adapted the original Ford F1 pedals with clutch onto our master cylinder, our brake master cylinder. And you'll see right there, there's the knuckle that connects the master cylinder. Two hole options. Right now I'm using the upper hole. And this will all have to be adjusted based on pedal heights, but I think it's going to work now. We did have to, there's 4 bolts in the face of the master cylinder vacuum advance unit, and so we were able to use those 4 bolts to bolt this plate on, but we did have to cut off 2 of the studs like you see right there, and then we used some 5/16 18 nuts to hold this off about 1/4 of an inch, and then we were able to put bolts in it. It has 5 bolts in it, and those we just cut some 1.5-inch studs out of 5/16 18 threaded rod, and we basically back welded them into this plate, so there's no clearance issues on the back of the plate. You can see it's flush up against. So I'm pretty happy with that. What we've got to do now is we've got to come in here and build a plate that comes across, that connects to our mounting bracket, similar to that plate right there. 4 holes in the mounting bracket, and we got to do it in such a way that it comes off of here, or it comes off here, excuse me, off this top side. We got to make sure it doesn't interfere with the clutch bracket, because again, this other one wasn't built to have the clutch on there, so there may be some interference here, but we'll deal with it. We'll clearance it as we need to. So yeah, I'm okay with that. Kind of a pain, a lot of work for one little old plate, but yeah, it's done, and I think we're going to be okay with it now. Next thing, let's get this cross member out of here. And this thing's got a ridiculous number of rivets. I think it's 3, 4, 5, 6 rivets to a side, and so we got to cut these rivets out. There's 2 right there, there's 1 there on the top, and then inside here there's 3 rivets on this bottom. So I think this thing wouldn't go anywhere. Let's see if we can make it go somewhere now, though. Talk to you in a bit. Alright, well, we're back at you. We took out the cross member. As you can see, here's the top rivet cross member. Cross member's gone, and so that now gives us room to hopefully mount this plate. Now, from what I can tell, based on pedal alignment with the center mount, this pedal, or this bracket rather, let me get down here, this bracket holes, these top 2 holes, align with the rivets that hold this running board, this frame support, frame bracket. This rivet went on the opposite side. So it looks like the expectation is to grind out this rivet and then put in 2 bolts. I don't want to grind out any more rivets, but I have to. So we'll grind those 2 rivets out and knock them out with a pin, and then that'll bolt in the top. Now, the one thing though that's a little bit disturbing about this with the new pedal set is this distance here that you see. This distance between here and here. That's going to bring our clutch pedal out considerably further than it was initially. Originally, the end of the clutch pedal was pretty much flush with this edge of the frame. Now it's going to come out by at least an inch, which is going to shift both pedals an inch to the right in the cab, and it could cause alignment problems with the hole that's already in the cab. So I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do there. I could just let them shift an inch. Probably not a train wreck. The other option is I could narrow this brace, come in here, basically cut an inch out, or whatever this dimension is, or even a little bit more than this dimension. Could cut that out and then weld that back together, and that might be better. We have room at the bottom down here, if you can see it. There's a hole on each end. You can see the hole there, but there's space between the edge of the frame and that bracket, so we could, like I said, we could cut out some on the top here and then let that slide in, re-weld it, and still have clearance enough to be able to get to our bolts from the back side in order to tighten everything up. So right now my inclination is to do that. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to grind out these rivets back here, get that thing mounted up flush, measure this dimension, see how much room, this one down here, see how much room we have to push this bracket in, and then cut this section out here at the top and re-weld it. Let's see if that works for us. See you in a little bit. Alright, well, we got the rivets ground out of here, put some 3/8 bolts in there, and so that bracket's now bolted in at the top, and we've got plenty of clearance on the bottom flange, bottom lip here, as well as up here, to take this thing down about 1/2 to 5/8 of an inch. I think we're going to aim for a 1/2, and yeah, a little large if we have to. So we'll cut down that bracket. Alright, so we said we were going to shorten this plate. I say that, bring it tighter to the end of the frame, and we did. It's pretty well even with the edge of the frame, so we're happy. Now we're mocking up the master cylinder and the pedal system. Right now you'll notice I got the pedals clipped together. Just keep the clutch pedal at the same level as the brake pedal for now. So got it sitting in here on a jack with a strap. It's hardly right. Back end is too low, so the whole thing will need to lean up a little bit. But the alignment of this pin, center pin of the pedals, to the alignment of that bolt there on the body mount is pretty good. It's about 1/4 inch ahead, which is where it should be. Height wise, we're about 3 1/4 inches from the center line of the pedal pivot point to the top of the frame. So generally that's where we need to be. We'll just have to make it straighter. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to build us a plate, 7 inches by 4 inches, 7.5 by 4. Piece of 1/4 plate goes from there out to the end of the mounting bracket there. 2 1/4 inches to the first set of holes. We'll measure off to get the rest of the sets. And we got to trim off this plate by about 5/8 of an inch. I intentionally left it proud because we weren't sure exactly how it was going to turn out. So that should put the end of the clutch pivot right up against that. So that also means we're going to have to relieve that 1/4 inch plate around that clutch pivot point. We're probably going to only end up with 3 holes, 3 bolt holes. This one will probably lose the one back here, that one right there, by the clutch pedal, because we're going to relieve that plate to allow the clutch pedal to actuate. And again, we're pushing everything real tight to the frame, so that's how it's got to be. So there'll be 3 bolt holes. We're also going to, when we get this plate welded on here, we'll gusset everything to reinforce it. So we're going to get on with it. We got dimensions and we're ready to go. So let's get to building this bracket. We're going to call this the end of part 8. Here's the installed pedals and power brake booster, master cylinder. Got this plate up here just holding the clutch pedal even with the brake pedal. And yeah, it's done a couple of dozen things actually. It's a real chore, bolting this thing on, fitting it up, marking it up, taking it off, modifying it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But it is done now. Basically, we have a plate. We have the original bracket, which we sliced it off a ½ inch, so it's more inside the frame than poking out. This shifts the pedals that way, but because of the addition of the clutch pedal, we need to be further that way to fit in the hole in the bottom of the cab. So that's been shrunk in. Then there's a 4x7, 7½ inch plate right here, which is bolted onto that. And then the plate that you saw earlier, where the master cylinder mounts and the brake pedals mount, pedal system mounts, that's here. We have gusseted it in a couple of places. There's a gusset down there, one up here. If I have any concern as to whether we have adequate gusseting, there's still options for more. I want to see how it responds once you actually sit in the cab and you know, press the pedals. Right now, you press the pedal, it looks pretty solid. I don't think there's going to be much of any issue. So that's bolted in. Master cylinder bolts in from the back. Pedal system bolts in from the front. We have hooked the brake linkage up for now, and yeah, I'm okay with it. Gonna need to clean up the braces a little better and 415 the whole thing, but we're gonna wait and do that a bit later. So again, there's the master cylinder vacuum booster and pedals from there. From this side, there's the 2 bolts that go through the body mount, and so you can kind of see. That's one other thing I had to do, chose to do, was I relieved this plate with a hole right there, basically so that the end of the clutch point there was all the way up against the metal. I don't know that it was interfering because this doesn't turn, only the pedal does, and so I don't think it was interfering, but it was so close. Just went ahead and put a little relief there by drilling that hole in that plate. It didn't take out any of our bolt points, so I was good with that. Anyway, moving on. Hopefully the next thing we're going to do at some point, well, first we got to build a cab lift. Once we get our cab lift, then hopefully we can roll the truck out of the garage, drop the cab on it temporarily, so that we can fit up our engine and transmission. Let's see how this goes.